In 1967, Israel launched an armed attack, as a result of which it occupied the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. At no point in this process did Israel acquire title over these territories. Moreover, theories that support an alleged Israeli title over these territories, such as the claim that the legal status of Palestinian territories was indeterminate, or that there was a sovereign vacuum that Israel was entitled to fill, are entirely unfounded. Accordingly, since 1967, Israel has exercised belligerent occupation over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. The African Union also submits that Israel's 57-year occupation of the Palestinian territories is unlawful and must be brought to an end. This determination is based on three arguments. First, as the overwhelming majority of parties in these proceedings have argued, Israel's occupation is unlawful because it violates the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by force, which is a corollary of the prohibition on the use of force. This constitutes a violation of a peremptory rule of international law. The evidence on this point is incontrovertible. Pronouncements by Israel's political leaders and the conduct of Israel on the ground reflect an intention to perpetuate the occupation through acts that amount to de jure and de facto annexation of Palestinian territories. Second, also as the overwhelming majority of parties have argued, Israel's occupation is unlawful because it deprives the Palestinian people of their right to self-determination. It is uncontested that the Palestinians are a people that are entitled to exercise self-determination. It is also established that self-determination is a right that is exercised in relation to a specific territory, and that it is unlawful to disrupt the unity and integrity of the territory in relation to which the right to self-determination is exercised. In the present case, the territories on which the Palestinians are entitled to exercise self-determination are the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, which constitute a single, indivisible territorial unit. Violating the right to self-determination also constitutes a violation of a peremptory rule of international law. Third, the cumulative effect of Israeli policies and practices that are associated with the occupation provides an additional basis on which to conclude that the occupation is, as a whole, unlawful. This is a point that deserves to be highlighted because it has been argued that violations of the law of belligerent occupation do not affect the legal status of the occupation. Specifically, the United States claimed, and I quote, that international law does not provide for an occupation itself to be rendered unlawful or void based either on its duration or on any violations of occupation law. This view is incorrect. The violations of international law committed by Israel in the occupied territories constitute continuing and composite breaches of international law. Specifically, Articles 14 and 15 of the ILC Articles on State Responsibility provide a basis for establishing that separate and distinct violations of the law of belligerent occupation can, when combined and viewed cumulatively, lead to the conclusion that the occupation as a whole is unlawful. Article 14.2 of the Articles on State Responsibility defines a continuing wrongful act as one that continues in time and remains not in conformity with an international obligation. According to the ILC, examples of a continuing wrongful act include, and I quote, the maintenance by force of colonial domination and unlawful occupation of part of the territory of another state. This confirms the relevance and applicability of this concept to the case of Palestine. Other examples of Israeli practices amounting to continuing breaches include settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, the separation wall, the network of bypass roads, legislative acts purporting to annex portions of the Palestinian territories, and the exploitation of water resources in the West Bank. In addition, internationally wrongful acts that are attributable to Israel should be viewed as composite breaches of international law. As defined by Article 15 of the Articles on State Responsibility, composite acts are made up of a series of actions or omissions defined in aggregate as wrongful. This does not exclude the possibility that every single act in the series could be wrongful in accordance with another obligation. As the ILC explained, the concept of composite breaches is intended to address situations where the responsible entity, including the state, adopted a systematic policy or practice, and that is precisely why the concept of composite breaches is valuable in the present case. It captures the fact that Israel's conduct is not composed of random or isolated wrongful acts. Israel is pursuing a systematic policy that is designed to perpetuate its control of the Palestinian territories. For example, the establishment and expansion of Israeli settlements and the transfer of over 700,000 Israeli settlers to the occupied territories is wrongful under Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Similarly, the construction of a bypass road is wrongful under Articles 46 and 52 of the 1907 Hague Regulations and Articles 49, 52, and 53 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. However, in addition to violating these specific rules of international law, the settlements, the bypass roads, and the separation wall and other practices are elements of an Israeli policy through which it is seeking to gain permanent control of the occupied territories, making it impossible to restore the status quo ante bellum. These Israeli practices, when viewed in their totality, make the occupation unlawful because they constitute composite wrongful acts that violate the prohibition on the use of force, the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by force, the prohibition on systematic racial discrimination, and the Palestinian people's inalienable right to self-determination.